she was the one. Out of every leader in Europe, Giorgia Meloni was the one who showed up. She was the only EU head of state who walked into Trump's inauguration. She called herself a bridge between Washington and Brussels. For over a year, while half of Europe kept Trump at arm's length, Meloni stuck her neck out and backed him. So here's the question you should be asking. What did that loyalty actually buy her? Because this week, we found out. Trump told an Italian journalist in a phone interview that Meloni was probably happy he talked to her, and that she'd basically begged him for a photo together at the G7 summit in France. Begged. For a picture. With him. And Meloni didn't sit on it. She didn't let her staff put out a quiet statement. She posted a video herself, looked into the camera, and said Trump's claim was completely fabricated. She said she was stunned. She said she didn't understand why the President of the United States would treat an ally this way, especially when he saves his patience and his accommodating tone for people who are actual enemies of the West. Then she said the line that's going to follow Trump around for a while. Italy and I do not beg. 5 words. That's all it took to turn a year of careful diplomacy into a public break, live, in front of everybody. And it didn't stop with her. Italy's own foreign minister, Antonio Tajani, canceled a planned trip to the United States over this. He called Trump's comments serious and offensive, not just to Meloni, but to the entire country of Italy. Think about that for a second. A cabinet-level official from one of America's oldest NATO allies looked at this situation and said, "No, I'm not getting on that plane." Over a made-up story about a photo. Here's the thing, this isn't just gossip. This is what happens when loyalty gets treated like leverage instead of something you actually value. Let's be real about what Meloni did for Trump. While other European leaders were keeping their distance, calling him unpredictable, worried about tariffs, worried about NATO commitments, worried about what his second term would mean for the continent, Meloni went the other direction. She built a relationship. She positioned Italy as the country that could talk to Washington when nobody else could. That's not nothing. That's political capital she spent, at home with her own voters, some of whom were never thrilled about her getting cozy with an American president plenty of Italians don't trust. And what does she get for it? A story that she says never happened, designed to make her look desperate. Made up, by her own account, and then repeated to the press like it was just a fun little anecdote. You don't have to take sides on every issue here to see the problem. This is bigger than one phone call and one photo. It's a pattern. Meloni herself pointed it out in that video. She said, "It's not the first time he's done something like this to an ally." And she made a sharper point than that too. She said it's a shame he doesn't bring that same energy, that same boldness to the people who are actually working against the United States. Instead, she said, those are the leaders he goes soft on. Sit with that. An ally who backed him publicly, who took political risk doing it, is now saying out loud that he treats friends worse than enemies. That's not coming from a political opponent trying to score points. That's coming from someone who spent over a year as one of his strongest defenders in Europe. And here's what makes this whole thing land different than a normal diplomatic spat. Meloni didn't sound scared. A political scientist out of Rome put it well, this kind of pushback might actually help her at home, because Italians have been cooling on Trump for a while now, and standing up to him publicly costs her nothing, and maybe gains her something. So if you're keeping score, Trump didn't just damage a relationship with an ally. He may have handed that ally a political win. Who pays for that? You'd think it's just two politicians and their egos. But alliances aren't abstract. They're the reason troops get deployed together, the reason trade deals get negotiated, the reason intelligence gets shared. When the foreign minister of an allied country cancels a trip over an insult, that's not a headline that stays contained. That ripples into every other conversation those two governments are supposed to be having about Ukraine, about Iran, about trade, about NATO spending. Every one of those gets a little harder when the leaders involved are publicly calling each other liars. And this is the part that should make you stop and think for a second. We are watching, in real time, an American president manufacture a conflict with one of the few European leaders who actually liked him. Not Russia, not Iran, not some adversary halfway across the world. An ally. Someone who showed up to his inauguration when almost nobody else did. If you're wondering why this matters to you, here's why. Foreign policy isn't a reality show, even when it gets treated like one. Every alliance America burns through casually makes the next crisis, and there's always a next crisis harder to manage. Allies remember how they're treated. Italy will remember this. Other European leaders watching this unfold will remember it too. And they'll factor it into how much they're willing to stick their necks out for Washington next time. Meloni took a gamble on this relationship. She bet that backing Trump publicly was worth more than the safety of staying neutral like most of her European peers. And this week what she got back was a fabricated story that made her look weak, told to a journalist in public. For what reason exactly? Nobody's been able to explain that part. Not the White House, they haven't responded to the claims. Not anyone close to Trump. So ask yourself, if this is how the loyal ones get treated, what does that tell you about the value of loyalty in this administration? What does it say to every other foreign leader sitting on the fence right now, watching to see whether getting close to Washington is worth the risk? Meloni answered her own question for everybody watching. She said it herself. Italy and I do not beg. She's not backing down, she's not apologizing for calling it out, and she's not pretending this didn't happen just to smooth things over for the cameras next time they're standing next to each other. That's the story here. Not a celebrity feud, not a tabloid spat. A genuine crack in one of the relationships America actually needs opened up over something that, by every account we have right now, simply wasn't true. Wake up. This is what it looks like when alliances get treated like props instead of partnerships. And it's going to cost more than one canceled trip before it's over. If you want to keep tracking how this plays out between Washington and Rome, and what it means for NATO, for Ukraine, for everything riding on these relationships staying intact, subscribe. Because this isn't the last chapter of this story.